Good morning. This is Gary Adams with the National Cotton Council. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Council's conference call and webinar regarding the recently passed seed cotton program. With the new program taking effect for this year's crop, we felt that it was important to disseminate the information as quickly as possible, and conducting a series of calls and webinars is the best way to do that. I'll remind everyone that the conference lines will be in lecture mode until after the presentation, and then we will open up for question and answer time. Also, you can download the presentation that we'll be using today from our website at www.cotton.org, as well as a summary document and other reference materials. By way of background, you'll recall that on February 9th, Congress passed a budget agreement that included supplemental disaster provisions for agriculture. In addition, the legislation included the seed cotton program, as well as provisions to improve the safety net for dairy producers. The seed cotton program represents the culmination of more than 2 years of concerted effort by the U.S. cotton industry to improve the support program by authorizing cotton's eligibility for the PLC and ARC programs within the 2014 Farm Bill. I want to recognize the diligent efforts of the staff of the National Cotton Council, as well as the numerous cotton industry associations that worked hard to achieve this outcome. Dedicated industry leadership was also critically important in these efforts, and to those I offer my thanks. Achieving this new policy would not have been possible without the tireless efforts of Congressman Mike Conaway, Chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, and Senator Thad Cochran, Chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. In addition, the industry is also very grateful for a number of key members of Congress across the Cotton Belt who supported this program. Before we review the program, let me address the importance of establishing a seed cotton policy in advance of the new Farm Bill and why it was necessary to convert generic base beginning in 2018 rather than 2019. Cotton producers needed an improved safety net as soon as possible, and the Supplemental Disaster Bill was the last legislative vehicle to accomplish that outcome ahead of the Farm Bill. The Supplemental Disaster Bill also provided an opportunity to add additional baseline funding through the changes for dairy and cotton. Adding new money would not have been possible in the Farm Bill process, and addressing cotton and dairy now will make the upcoming Farm Bill development a bit less difficult. Generic base acres are cotton base from the previous Farm Bill and were intended as a temporary measure to keep some support on those acres until a new cotton policy was implemented in Title I. The conversion of generic base in 2018, 1 year ahead of the new Farm Bill, helped ensure the budget resources currently associated with generic acres would remain within the new cotton program and with other crops that establish base acres by converting generic base to crop-specific bases. If development of the cotton policy and conversion of generic base occurred in the context of the upcoming Farm Bill debate, there would have been many more interests involved who would want a portion of the generic base acre payments to go to their priorities instead. Strengthening the cotton program and converting generic base acres so that all payment acres are now decoupled from planting should make it easier to defend and maintain the support levels and payment limit provisions that are critically important to agriculture across the Cotton Belt. With the approval of the provisions for cotton and dairy, the agriculture committees are in a much better position to move forward with the development of the new Farm Bill. In the upcoming Farm Bill, cotton will be focused on maintaining the seed cotton policy. The industry is also seeking improvements to the operation of the marketing loan program, enhancements in cotton flow, and increasing support for the U.S. textile industry. We anticipate the House Agriculture Committee will pass their version of the new Farm Bill out of committee by the end of the first quarter. The Senate Agriculture Committee is likely to follow shortly after. The committee bills must then be approved by their respective bodies and then work out any differences in conference. This needs to occur by September 30, when some provisions of the existing Farm Bill begin to expire. So still a very busy year in front of us for Farm Bill development. Given the numerous attacks on agricultural policy by outside interest groups from across the political spectrum, it's critical that all of U.S. agriculture work together to defend the Farm Bill. Let me thank you for your participation in the conference call and webinar. I also want to add a special thanks to those that are hosting groups at your office. If you would do us a favor and to give us an idea of the number of people that we reach, I'd ask those with groups to give us a rough idea of the number at your location by typing the number of attendees into the webinar's chat window. We will take questions at the end of the presentation, with the questions posed through the webinar chat window being addressed first, and then we'll open up the conference lines. And certainly if you have any follow-up questions or you need any additional information after the webinar, you are always welcome to contact your NCC Member Services representative, contact myself, or any of the staff in either the Memphis or the Washington office. I'll now introduce Dr. Jody Campeacci, the Council's Vice President of Economic and Policy Analysis, for today's presentation. So Jody, I'll now turn it over to you.
So we'll cover the 2018 Seed Cotton Program information. The information that we will present today is based on our review of the legislative language. Final details are subject to change based on USDA's interpretation of the language and implementation. Seed cotton is designated as a covered commodity eligible for PLC and ARC programs in the 2014 Farm Bill, beginning with the 2018 crop. Seed cotton refers to unginned upland cotton that includes both lint and cotton seed. The reference price is set at 36.7 cents per pound. The price floor is set at 25 cents per pound. The seed cotton marketing your average price is a weighted average of the upland cotton lint price and the cottonseed price. These prices are weighted based on annual shares of production. So this will change, of course, on an annual basis. We take the U.S. upland cotton lint production times the cotton lint marketing average price plus U.S. cottonseed production times the U.S. cottonseed marketing average price, and we divide that by U.S. lint production and U.S. cottonseed production. The marketing or average price is not final until the end of the marketing year. The marketing year runs from August 1st to July 31st. USDA generally publishes these numbers in late September to early October. During the marketing year, USDA does publish monthly estimates, and we will be providing a document on our website tracking these monthly prices and then tracking production as well, so we can calculate the seed cotton marketing average price. These are NASS prices for both upland cotton lint and cottonseed. So let's walk through an example using the current estimates for the 2017-18 crop year. So the U.S. upland cotton lint marketing average price is 69 cents a pound. U.S. cotton seed marketing average price is $150 a ton. So first we will convert cotton lint production from bales to pounds. Then we will convert cotton seed production from tons to pounds. We add the two together and we have total U.S. cotton lint and cotton seed production. Okay, now we just plug the numbers into the formula and we end up with the weights down on the bottom line, and our annual weight or share for lint would be 0.4233. We multiply that by the lint price. The weight for cotton seed would be 0.5767. We multiply that by the cottonseed price, and we get the seed cotton marketing year average price of 33.53. And again, this will change on an annual basis. We'll provide monthly estimates of this price as well. Okay, so this chart shows seed cotton prices over time. You can see the lint prices in red, the cottonseed prices in gray, and then the combined seed cotton price in blue. And if you take a look at the 17 values, which you can't see 17, the number 17 on this chart, just look out to the far right, you can see that lint prices increased from 16 to 17. You can see that cottonseed prices decreased from 16 to 17. When we calculate the seed cotton price, you see a slight decline in the seed cotton price from 16 to 17. Now, if you look at historically where the reference price is and then where the seed cotton price falls at, you can see that the reference price in the green line is 36.7 cents, and with the exception of a few years in there, you can look historically, and the seed cotton price is actually below the reference price. Okay, now if you take a look at cottonseed, we can look at cottonseed marketing or average prices and then lint marketing or average prices and see what the seed cotton marketing or average price would be for these alternative combinations. Now first let's take a look at the example that we just went through. We have a lint marketing or average price of 69 cents a pound. We have a cottonseed marketing or average price of $150 a ton. You can see the price that we just calculated in red of 33.53 cents. Now let's say that the lint marketing or average price drops to 61 cents and the cottonseed marketing or average price stays at $150 a ton. You'll see that the seed cotton marketing or average price would be 0.301 or about 30 cents. Same thing happens if you go across. You can look at higher lint prices, higher cottonseed prices, or any combination of the two. And anywhere on this particular spreadsheet where you see the number, the seed cotton marketing or average price of below the reference price of 0.367, a payment would be made under the PLC program. Also, I want to point out that this spreadsheet is available on our website, so you can download the Excel file and then look at it more closely later. Okay, the seed cotton payment yield is equal to the lint yield plus the cottonseed yield. It's also equal to 2.4 times the lint yield. Since the cottonseed yield is determined as 1.4 times the lint yield, the 1.4 conversion factor for cottonseed is consistent with the approach used in crop insurance. The upland cotton lint payment yield is equal to the higher of the CCP lint yield or the updated lint yield. There's a one-time opportunity to update the payment yield for upland cotton based on 90% of the average of the 2008 to 12 actual yields, not counting years in which cotton was not grown. And this is consistent with the yield options available to other covered commodities during the 2014 Farm Bill implementation. Okay, so looking at a seed cotton payment yield example, let's assume a cotton lint yield of 800 pounds per acre. To get the pounds of cottonseed, we take 1.4 times 800, and that would be 1,120 pounds per acre. The seed cotton payment yield would be equal to 800 plus 1,120, and that would be equal to 1,920 pounds per acre. This is also equal to 2.4 times 800. The seed cotton payment, PLC payment, will be made when the reference price exceeds the higher of the marketing year average price and the price floor. The payment rate is equal to the reference price minus the higher of the marketing year average price and the price floor. The seed cotton payment rate would be 0 if the seed cotton marketing year average price is greater than the reference price of 36.7. The seed cotton PLC payment is paid on 85% of the farm's decoupled seed cotton base. So the payment equals the PLC payment rate times the payment yield times 85% of base acres. And this is consistent with the PLC program for other covered commodities in the 2014 Farm Bill. So looking at an example, we'll use the same seed cotton marketing or average price that we calculated earlier of 33.53 cents. To get the payment rate, we take the reference price of 36.7 minus the higher of 33.53 and 25 cents, which is the price floor. We take the payment rate and multiply that by 1,920 pounds per acre, and we multiply that by 85%. Then you get payment per base acre of $51.73. Now, the payment is made on the full 1,920 acres. The 85% applies to base, but if we go ahead and include the 85% in the calculation now, you have the $51.73 that would be spread across all base acres. Seed cotton base acres are established through the conversion of generic base acres. Generic base acres are not in effect beginning with the 2018 crop. For any farms with generic base and no covered commodities, including seed cotton, planted from 2009 through 2016, those generic base acres will become unassigned crop base and ineligible for PLC or ARC. Now, if any covered commodity, so if 1 acre of one covered commodity was planted in any single year from 2009 to 2016, the generic base would still be eligible. This does not affect existing base, so any existing base of other covered commodities will not change with this program. This only applies to generic base. So producers will have the opportunity to convert generic base to seed cotton and other covered commodity base acres using option 1 or option 2. Under option 1, seed cotton base equals the higher of 2009 to 12 average seed cotton plantings or 80% of generic base, not to exceed total generic base. So any unconverted generic base becomes unassigned crop base and ineligible for PLC or ARC. Option 2, all generic base is converted proportionally based on 2009 to 2012 average plantings of seed cotton and other covered commodities. Option 2 is consistent with the base update options that were available during the implementation of the 2014 Farm Bill. So let's walk through a couple of examples. Okay, example 1. Let's assume that a farm has generic base of 500 acres. From 2009 to 2012, 300 acres of cotton was planted, 200 acres of corn, 200 acres of peanuts, and 100 acres of soybeans. So we have total covered commodities of 800 acres. Okay, so under option 1, seed cotton base equals the higher of 2009 to 2012 average planted cotton acres, which would be 300. 80% times 500 generic base acres would be 400. So seed cotton base would be 400, and unassigned base would be 100. Under option 2, allocate 500 acres of generic base to the following crops. So we have cotton. 300 acres was planted. We divide 300 by 800, which is the total covered commodities, and then multiply that by 500 acres of generic base, and we get 187 acres of cotton. We do the same for corn, peanuts, and soybeans. So in option 2, if a producer wanted to gain additional base acres of other covered commodities other than just cotton, then option 2 could be used. Okay, the next example. We have 500 acres of generic base. From 2009 to 2012, average planted acres were cotton, 500 acres, wheat, 200, sorghum, 100. So total covered commodities of 800. Under option 1, seed cotton base would equal the higher of 2009 to 12 average planted cotton acres of 500. 80% of 500 generic base is 400. So seed cotton base would be 500, unassigned base would be 0. So if a farm has planted an amount equal to generic base or higher than generic base, in seed cotton from 2009 to 2012, then the farm would not lose any generic base, and there would be 0 unassigned base. Under option 2, we would allocate 500 acres of generic base to cotton, wheat, and sorghum, and total allocated base would be 500. Okay, the next example, generic base equals 500 acres, 2009 to 12 average planted acres, cotton was 600, corn was 200, for a total of 800 acres of covered commodities. Under option 1, seed cotton base would equal the higher of 2009 to 12 average planted cotton acres, which is 600, 80% times 500 generic base acres is 400. However, since seed cotton base cannot be greater than generic base, the seed cotton base would be maxed out at 500 acres. Unassigned base would be 0. Under option 2, the farm could allocate 500 acres of generic base to cotton and corn. Okay, the next example. Again, we have generic base of 500 acres. From 2009 to 12, 100 acres of cotton was planted, 100 acres of corn was planted, and 600 acres of alfalfa, which is a non-covered commodity, was planted. So when we add up total covered commodities, we have 200 because we only add the cotton and the corn. So under option 1, seed cotton base equals the higher of 2009 to 12 average planted cotton acres, which is 200. 80% times 500 generic base acres is 400. So seed cotton base would be 400, unassigned base would be 100. Or, under option 2, we can allocate 500 acres of generic base to cotton and corn. And even though only 100 acres of cotton was planted and only 100 acres of corn for a total of 200 acres of covered commodities, we still allocate the full 500 acres of generic base to cotton and corn. So we end up with 250 acres of cotton and 250 acres of corn. Okay, so this spreadsheet shows the seed cotton PLC payments per base acre under different price scenarios for lint and cottonseed. And in this example, I'm showing a lint payment yield of 500, so you'll see that number at the top in red. This spreadsheet is available on our website, and you can open it in Excel, and you'll be able to change that lint payment yield to whatever yield you want to look at, and the whole spreadsheet will calculate the numbers for you. So let's look at the prices that we used here in these previous examples. So a lint marketing average price of 69 cents and a cottonseed marketing average price of $150 a ton. You can see the number in red would be $32 per base acre. And these numbers have already been multiplied by the 85% factor. So this would be $32 spread across all of your base acres. Now, if we wanted to look at a lower price, you could take a look at maybe a lint price of 61 cents, follow that 61 cents across to $150 a ton for cottonseed, and you could see that the payment would be $67 an acre. And you can do the same thing as you move across the spreadsheet. You can see down towards the bottom and to the right, you'll see zeros. At certain combinations, let's look at, say, where the lint marketing average price is 77 cents and the cottonseed marketing average price is $150 a ton, you'll see 0 payments. Same thing, if you move across, you can see other combinations that would result in a 0 payment as well. Okay, now let's take a look at an example using a 700-pound lint payment yield. And again, as I mentioned, the 700-pound would then be multiplied by 2.4 to get your seed cotton payment yield. So in this example, the seed cotton payment yield would be 1,680. And once you go to open the spreadsheet, that will calculate for you. Okay, so look at the 69-cent lint marketing your average price, and look at the $150 a ton cottonseed marketing your average price, and you see a payment per base acre of $45. Okay, now let's look at an example with a lint payment yield of 900. Again, the 900 multiplied by 2.4 would give you a seed cotton payment yield of 2,160 pounds. At 69 cents for a lint price and $150 a ton for the cottonseed price, you'll see a payment of $58 per base acre. Okay, so for other details, for the 2018 crop, the Stax insurance product may be purchased for acres of upland cotton planted on a farm enrolled in the Seed Cotton PLC or ARC program. Of course, Stax must be purchased prior to the sales closing date. However, there are restrictions for the 2019 and later crops. Stax cannot be purchased on a farm that is enrolled in PLC or ARC in 2019, but you can do that in 2018. The non-recourse marketing assistance loan for upland cotton lint remains unchanged in the 2014 Farm Bill, with an upland cotton loan rate of 52 cents a pound for the 2018 crop. PLC and ARC payments for seed cotton are subject to the payment limit of $125,000, which applies to other covered commodities other than peanuts. Now, the examples that we've talked about are just for the PLC calculations. We will be providing ARC example calculations on our website as well. So looking ahead, there will be several decisions for producers and landowners. For landowners, the option to update payment yields. If the updated yield is greater than the CCP yield, then the payment yield would be updated. We'll also choose between the base update options. And I wanted to make sure to mention this because many of you will remember at the implementation of the 2014 Farm Bill that all landowners had to sign the form to update payment yields or choosing between base update options, unless you had power of attorney and your power of attorney covered all decisions and you were able to sign for the landowners. But you probably need to check on that to make sure your power of attorney will still be valid for this and that you don't need to make any changes. Now, producers will choose between PLC or ARC. Producers will make a PLC ARC election for the 2018 crop year on each farm with seed cotton base. If all producers on a farm fail to make a unanimous election for PLC and ARC, the farm will be assumed to choose PLC for seed cotton. This decision is only for the 2018 crop. So for the next steps, you can start to gather similar information used during implementation of the 2014 Farm Bill. Yield records from 2008 to 2012. Planning history from 2009 to 2012. Now, FSA has not announced a sign-up date. USDA has been working on the implementation details. Currently, your local FSA office is not ready for you to come in and start making these decisions. But at the appropriate time, you can check with your office and start working on this. Now, in the meantime, you can stay informed by checking our website, www.cotton.org. We will be posting additional information. We have a summary that we will continue to update. The PowerPoint presentation from this webinar is located there. The audio from this webinar, as well as all of our other webinars, are located on our NCC YouTube page. We will be providing ARC examples. We will have a frequently asked questions document where we will provide questions and answers from all of the webinars. We'll also be updating a document once we get into the 2018 marketing year that tracks the NASS marketing your average prices for cottonseed and lint, and then also the seed cotton marketing your average price. I want to thank you for participating in the webinar and thank you for your support of the National Cotton Council. We will now open up the webinar to questions via the chat window.
All right, thank you, Jody, and again, thanks everyone for their participation in the webinars. We've got some good numbers that have logged into the webinar, so we appreciate you taking time out of your day to attend this session. We now will be working through the chat windows and looking at questions. We've got several staff here in our conference room in the Memphis office, and we'll certainly do our best to answer your questions. And if we do not have the answers now, or if it's a detail we're not aware of, we will be updating that, researching that, and updating that as part of those frequently asked questions that Jody mentioned. A question coming in about what happens to the unassigned base, and that's a very good question. The legislative language does require USDA to maintain the records on each farm for any of those base acres that are converted to unassigned base. So the data will be there. Now, what's the longer term outcome or for unassigned base is unclear. What is clear is that for 2018 they're not eligible for the PLC and ARC payments. Now, to the extent that that would be carried over, any future years would be addressed by the new Farm Bill. But USDA will have the records on that data because this does maintain that those records be maintained. Question on if other program crops have already been planted on generic acres for the 2018 crop year, are those planted crops eligible for PLC payments in 2018? Not based off of those crops will not be based off of the generic acre attribution. We understand this is late coming, there's a late developments by Congress in terms of getting the program in place for 2018, as producers have already had to make some decisions. But any payments under PLC or ARC will be tied to the decoupled base that's established as part of the conversion process that farms will have to go through. Those farms with generic acres. So if on that farm those generic acres are converted to seed cotton, then if there are any PLC payments associated with seed cotton, it will those acres, those decoupled acres, would be eligible for any PLC payments under seed cotton. Likewise, if those acres are converted to another covered commodity based off of the 2009 to 12 planting history, then any payments, whether they be PLC or ARC, depending on the election, would be eligible for those as well. And you got one? Questions coming in about young and beginning farmers who weren't farming in 09 to 12 and how they'll be able to allocate base acres given that they no production history. And I think this may come back to, and this we'll certainly want to verify this with FSA, regardless of if it's a situation of a young or beginning farmer who wasn't farming the land in 2009 to 12, or whether it was an existing producer who picked up a farm that they were not farming in 2009 to 2012. I believe in that case they're going to go back to the production history that was on the farm in that year. So even though you were not farming that land, it's still going to go back to the production history that would be on file with Farm Service Agency. And this, of course, is assuming that the farm, though, does have generic base on it in that period.
Okay, another question is, what production records are we able to use? So you can use, of course, RMA information. There is a form that FSA used during the last sign-up, and there was various forms of data. Some data was provided by the producer, assuming that you had the appropriate records to back them up. You can use, of course, FSA data, and in the example that Gary just went through, some of this data may be from a prior owner that still is associated with that farm. So there's several records that can be used, and the main thing is that you just have to make sure that you can verify the production from any records that you have.
And while we're waiting as well, I do want to, for any other questions that may come in, I do want to pass along, or just as a reminder, we will have another webinar that's essentially kind of a makeup date for anybody that would like to participate again, or if you weren't able to do this one, for Monday, February 26th, and that's 10 a.m. Central. So there will be another webinar, and then any information that needs to be updated. There was a question came in about the ARC portion of the program. ARC is an option, just as PLC is an option. We will be working to put up an example on ARC on our website, hopefully by close of business tomorrow. The ARC portion will work the same way as it does for other commodities. A couple of things to keep in mind. In terms of the fact that when they look at the 5-year average price, then if there's any individual years in which that 5-year those prices fall below the reference price, then a producer is going to be able to, or the formula will sub in the reference price. So essentially, if we think back to that chart Jody had, where there were some years recently where the seed cotton price was below the reference price, it would get plugged in. So the reference price will play a large role in determining the price that goes into that county level revenue. It'll also be based on, obviously, a county level expected yield. And then once, if whether or not an ARC payment is triggered is whether or not the actual county revenue will fall below 86% of the established revenue. And then it will pay from 86% down to 76%. I think, so again, we'll do some examples and give you an idea of what the payment rates will be. I think in the case of ARC, one of the things that we may see is that that the ARC could trigger, but it may not have the same level of maximum payment that we would have had under a PLC program. Let me touch on, there's a question that came in on the 90-day window that's laid out in the legislation. If you look at the legislative language, the legislative language actually put in place directions to the Secretary that not later than 90 days after date of enactment, the Secretary shall require the owner of the farm to make the allocation decision for generic base. So by the letter of this language, it would have started, date of enactment was February 9th, and so that 90-day window is ticking now, or that clock is ticking. We know that USDA is working on implementation now. They're going through some of the initial background work. They've had follow-up meetings with committee staff. They're reaching out to cotton industry associations. In fact, we'll be participating in a call with them here later this week. So they're certainly working on that. There's a lot to do, though, in that 90-day window when you consider that there was this change that was put in place. There was also changes in dairy. And then there's the disaster assistance provisions that need to be implemented. We'll see how quickly USDA can adhere to that 90-day window. Obviously, they need to move as quickly as possible because so the producers have some certainty. And go ahead. Jody's got another question that she'll follow up on now.
Okay, the question is regarding yield. Will there be an opportunity to drop a yield due to crop losses caused by natural disaster such as hail or early freeze? So in the FSA information for the 2014 Farm Bill implementation, for the yield update, producers had the opportunity to actually substitute a yield equal to 75% of the county average yield if any of the years a producer had a yield from 2008 to 2012 that was less than 75% of the county average yield. This is currently what I'm aware of that you would be able to substitute. We will check with FSA on this, but I'm not currently aware of being able to drop a yield due to a natural disaster, but we'll follow up on that.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Question coming in about 2009 to 12 the only option for updated yields, and actually the 2014 Farm Bill, and we've had questions before about why going back to data that's several years old at this point, and part of the effort here, or part of the intent or the logic, is to essentially offer the same options that producers with other base acreage had when the 2014 Farm Bill was implemented. So that is why it's going back to that earlier period. On the yields, it will be 2008 to 2012. I know there's an inconsistency there. It seems like maybe not an inconsistency. There's a difference in the periods that were used. The base reallocation is 2009 to 12. The yield update is 2008 to 12, but those are both the periods that were established by the 2014 Farm Bill. So, unfortunately, that will be the time period that's used, is 2008 to 12. There's not the ability to use current yields, and I know that's for some parts of the Cotton Belt, particularly in parts of Texas. That 2008 to 2012 period had some tough years, weather-wise and yield-wise.
Okay, had a comment about the fact that you could lose as much as 35% of cotton base acres, 20% of generic acres, and then 85% of acres paid. Now, one thing I do want to point out for the 85%, this is consistent with the ARC and PLC programs that are currently in place for other covered commodities in the 2014 Farm Bill. So I just want to be clear that it's not just cotton that gets paid on 85% of base acres.
And I think, too, if somebody's, and to follow up on Jody's point, obviously, if somebody's planting, if those generic acres have been planted to cotton in excess of the 80%, then the producer would be able to convert all of those generic acres to cotton base. Question about what the yield is based on. Those yield update opportunities will be based on those yield records, and it'll be really coming back to a yield per planted acre over that period.
And just to follow up on that, it's going to be 90% of the average yield from 2008 to 2012. So if that is higher than the current CCP yield, then the farm would update the yield. If not, you would keep the CCP yield.
And then specifically, there was a question about yield plugs or for 2011 and 12 were applicable, and I think that goes back to Jody's earlier answer about the fact that if you're below a certain percent of the county yield, 75% of the county yield, then it'll default to 75% of the county yield. And now, for some, that may not, as we look back at some of the data, there's some very, very low county yields for some of those years, so it still may not provide the kind of relief that's necessary. It's a question, it kind of jumps on, goes off of this subject of seed cotton, but it is a question that we've been getting and about other efforts in terms of potential support for cotton producers. So I do want to address that, and that's regarding cotton ginning cost share assistance programs. You all know we had one implemented that was based off of 2015 acreage. We have, as the industry and the entire industry in a very unified effort, has been pursuing a ginning cost share assistance program, another round of ginning cost share assistance program for either the 2016 or 2017 crops. And we know that is under, I wish I could give you a definitive answer on the progress or the likelihood of that program. We do think it's still a possibility. We know it's under strong consideration by USDA. I know over the past few months when Secretary Perdue has had the opportunity to visit parts of the Cotton Belt and hear firsthand from some of you about the financial difficulties that have been out there, that are continuing to be out there. I think that's made a strong impression on the Secretary, so we hope something will be forthcoming, but we do not have any definitive word at this point. If it does come about, what we understand that is being looked at would be a program based off of 2016 acreage, planted and considered planted, and probably at a level that's about 1/2 the level that was authorized in the 2015 program. so it's not as much money devoted to it. But still, I think any assistance would be appreciated because, as you know, based on the timing of PLC and ARC payments, while this program is being established now for the 2018 crop, and that crop is going to be planted here in the coming weeks, those payments, if there are any, will not be conveyed to producers until October of 2019. So still quite a bit of time in front of us before producers actually receive assistance under this new seed cotton program. That just underscores the importance of hopefully having a ginning cost share assistance program sometime in the early part of this year. There's a question about separation of dry land and irrigated land, and I think there it depends on the program we're talking about. For a producer who's establishing on a farm a payment yield, for the purposes of PLC program, that's going to be one payment yield that's a blended between irrigated and dry land for the purposes of the PLC program. I do believe that if you look at the county level ARC options, that those, to the extent data will be available, will be separate programs for irrigated and dry land if a producer is looking at the county level ARC decision. Again, we're noticing that some are still typing in questions through the webinar, so we appreciate those questions coming. I would also mention, I don't know if we covered this earlier, but just remind you, the webinars that we've been conducting are being recorded. So the audio of the Q&A that we're doing can be viewed on our YouTube, our YouTube channel. Jody will also be doing a separate YouTube video that'll be the kind of a walkthrough of this presentation as well. So that's something else producers can follow up with after the fact, is both the webinar and the YouTube channel. Question coming in about how will generic acres be treated if the farm was in CRP from 2009 through 2016. That question, we've had that question a couple of times, and that's a very good question. You know, by the strict reading of this legislative language, you know, I don't know that those acres are going to be eligible if they're coming out now and eligible for 2018, having no covered commodity planted on it in that period that'll be eligible. Now, having said that, there is language in the 2014 Farm Bill that specifically addressed farms returning back out of CRP and how those base acres are handled. So I think that's an implementation question we've got to follow up with FSA on. Is we have this language, which is an amendment to the Farm Bill, but where does that come into play in terms of some of the other language? And I think it may be a section 1112 of the 2014 Farm Bill. So that's a question we'll follow up on and determine how those acres will be treated under this program. And I think one of the points we reiterate, I know that you know, there's a few things that are different in terms of trying to put this seed cotton program in place. particularly with looking at the 80% and then some of the limitations on the base acreage that would be eligible for PLC and ARC, and that was certainly a lot of discussion within the industry and also with the congressional offices and committee staff, and trying to the greatest extent possible, focus the support levels on those acres that have been in and continue to be in cotton production. Certainly this is a very positive step forward in terms of putting this program in place. It puts us in a much better position as we look ahead to the next Farm Bill. We hope the Farm Bill even gives us some opportunities to build on this program and look ahead to the next program. So we're seeing a slowdown in the webinar questions right now. We want to be respectful of your time as well. We're certainly going to be open for questions. We're going to see how the background noise is if we take the conference calls out of lecture mode and see if there's anybody who may just be participating on the conference call or has a follow-up question that they would like to ask at this point in time.
The conference is no longer in lecture mode. The conference is in lecture mode.
And we'll see how the background noise is. If you have a question, we encourage you to ask it. But if not, we'd ask you to put your phone on mute on your end, and then we'll see if any questions come. And I know we're getting another question about the CRP acres. That's one we're going to follow up with the land coming out of CRP. Well, if there are no questions coming through at this point, we'll bring the conference call and webinar to a conclusion. I would just reiterate again, though, whether there are, if you think of any additional questions, you can always reach out to your member service representative with the National Cotton Council. You can always check in with us either by calling the Memphis office or reaching out to us by email. We are always here to certainly help in any way possible. I do think maybe we're getting another question or two coming in. A question comes in about any changes to the rules for the entities, and good question under this program, and the answer is no. This legislative language makes no changes to the rules on the entities that are that a farm may have, that may be associated with a farming operation. So those will stay the same as what was established under and has been in effect for the 2014 Farm Bill. And do need to reiterate, as Jody mentioned, these payments will apply to the same $125,000 per entity payment limit that you have, basically the grain and oilseed payments apply to, as well as if there are any loan deficiency payments apply to that. Peanuts still will have and maintain a separate limit, but that $125,000 limit that was established under the Farm Bill, these seed cotton payments will apply to that level. All right, well, again, we do appreciate your participation in the conference call and webinar. We hope the resources that we're providing on the website will be beneficial to you, and we will continue to update those. And again, a reminder that we will have another webinar that'll be open to all states across the Cotton Belt, and that will be Monday, February 26th from 10 a.m. until 11:30 a.m. Central. So thank you very much, and hope you have a good day.